Hey, good morning, everyone. I assume everybody can hear me. Can we hear? Can you all hear me? Good. Well, good morning, everyone. My name's Chip Barton, and I am part of the team here at Hannah Resource Group. And we want to first just thank everybody for attending today to part 2 of our 5-part series, Job Hunting in a Pandemic: A Survival Guide to Rejoining the Workforce. John, do you want to move on to the second slide there?
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Oh, thank you.
There you go.
Well, again, welcome everybody. Today is part 2 of this 5-part series, and really over this 5 weeks, our mission is to bring you guidance on the most critical parts of the job search that we really hope will set you up for success. It's such a difficult time right now, and we see this as a journey. And these 5 weeks, we really have it broken down into 5 specific modules that help guide you through the process from being an applicant to a candidate to hopefully your ultimate goal as a candidate with a job. Today's session, drafting an impactful resume in today's work world or world of work, will cover topics to help you create a resume that you can be proud of. And we really want to focus on and provide guidance on helping you adjust your resume that really presents your capabilities and resonates well with employers. We'll talk about what you should and should not include in a resume, your date, experience, education, salary, those types of things. We'll give you examples of really effective and maybe not so effective resumes, talk about the importance and self-commitment to really keeping your resume updated throughout your career as well, especially in these times that we're in now. And then we'll talk about the importance of networking. So that's what we're going to cover today. As you can see, every Wednesday at 11 a.m. for the next 3 weeks after today, we'll be covering the other modules, such as you can see there, overcoming digital disappointment, interviewing in the new normal, and job offer decision making, really evaluating and negotiating an offer during these uncertain times. All right, so I'll introduce you to our team that's going to be with us today. Everybody here is from the Hannah Resource Group. We've got Andrea Tyra, who's an HR coordinator with us, and Andrea's a 2019 graduate of Eastern Kentucky University and is currently pursuing her master's degree, her MBA at EKU. John Coffey is the Director of Talent Acquisition here at HRG, and John brings more than 15 years of experience in talent acquisition and talent acquisition leadership in a wide range of industries, everything from automotive to banking to telecom, IT, legal, distilled spirits and bourbon, medical, and many, many others, too many to mention. And then we have Ray Davis. Ray is a career transition coach, and Ray brings more than 30 years of experience as a career transition coach and a job coach, and he also brings 19 years experience in sales and marketing. Ray received his bachelor's degree from UK and an MBA from Ohio State University. And sorry, I failed to mention, I think that John Coffey received his MBA from Ohio University. Got a couple guys from the upper border with us today. And then next, I'll just show you sort of those next sessions that are coming up. Each week we have a guest speaker who really is going to bring their expertise in and talk about that day's topic. And today we feature Christie Jackson. Christie is with us today. She's a talent acquisition consultant at the Hannah Resource Group, and she's currently consulting with the Sazerac Company over in New Albany, Indiana. Christie brings numerous years of HR experience in the corporate and manufacturing environments. She's also the 2021 Director of Sponsorship and Foundation for the Louisville Society of Human Resource Management, and works as a human resource advocate for the National Society of Human Resource Management. Christie received her BA from Northern Kentucky University and her Master's in Human Resources and Organizational Development from the University of Louisville. So thank you all again for participating. We asked you to visit us each week for the next 3 weeks after today. You can get information on those sessions at our website at hannahresource.com. You can easily navigate those sessions, register for the next ones, and you can access previous recordings of the sessions that you may have missed. We ask you to invite others to attend these. We all know people who have been affected by the pandemic and who are out of work and looking for work and don't know where to turn. And we really are proud to be able to offer this free service to those. And we want everybody who can benefit to join us. So after we get started here, we're going to mute everybody so we don't have any background noise. But there is a chat feature you should have at the bottom of your screen, and you can use that to ask questions. And then certainly at the end of the session, we're going to open it up for questions that we'll answer as well. So again, thank you all for attending. And I'm going to pass it over to John and let him take over.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us again. And so for this, we've got a lot of content to cover today. Everywhere from facts that can immediately make an impact to resume basics to understanding the job market and just getting you prepared. And before we get into that, really it's going to start with one simple truth. Job hunting, in that process, at the end of the day, before it even starts, you get one chance to make a really good impression. And in a digital age, unless you have an in with your network, that often starts with your resume. So what I wanted to do was just talk a little bit about resume logic before we get into the particulars of resume building, because I think taking a step back and really framing that up is just going to make such a big difference. So making a first impression, before we get into full-on resume theory, there's truthfully a good history lesson from Leonardo Da Vinci that we can all learn here. I am not a history major, but I will say that, in my experience, I heard about this story and I just thought, wow, it was so powerful. So to kick things off, I just wanted to start by, discussing a fun fact. So Leonardo Da Vinci was actually credited with drafting the first ever resume in 1482. So why is that relevant outside of it being a fun trivia fact to wow your friends? Well, it's the lesson that we learn behind it. The cliff notes of the story really goes like this, okay? Da Vinci had a burning interest to work for the city of Milan, and he decided to write a letter to the regent of the city, Ludovico Sforza, don't ask me to say that twice, but to gain employment as a designer, a builder, and an artist. And he was becoming pretty well known at the time. He actually had already completed 2 Madonna paintings, but instead of touting himself in that way, he never mentioned it. Instead, he focused his letter on his strengths that were aligned to the Duke's needs, or regent, and he outlined in great detail just how he could help the city ensure victory during a war, and then also create beautiful buildings and paintings during times of peace. He really kind of spoke to his accomplishments, and he knew his target audience, he knew what his target audience was going to be most interested in. So spoiler alert, fast forward a few centuries, he got the job, and ultimately he landed the role as the director of festivities. He worked in Milan for 17 years, went on to paint The Last Supper. And the 2 takeaways I want you to gain from that story and why I think it's important is that his resume was extremely personalized. Instead of sending a generic one that was written to Sforza, he personalized it. And then secondly, it wasn't just about him. Instead, it was about how he could help the city and add value with his experience and skills. So in today's world, it certainly would have room for improvement. We're not saying that that's the perfect guideline by any means, but just imagine if Da Vinci were able to be alive today and had access to things like LinkedIn or YouTube to show off his skills. So something really to think about there. And I think an important lesson for us all. And then also another piece of info I wanted to share with you guys is that there was an eye tracking study done by Ladders back in 2012, and it was refreshed in 2018. And this study is so important because we used to call this in recruiting as the 6-second rule. And what that really meant was that it's a study that tracked the amount of time recruiters looked at the resumes of job seekers. So despite all the great information, recruiters generally would skim resumes and spend about 6 seconds per resume on it. In 2018, they actually updated that to 7.4, kind of stating that, post-recession back in 2012, if we remember back that far, a little bit more time, a little bit less resumes to review. So, but now if we think about the world that we're in today, I would almost challenge that we're probably a little bit below that number. So in today's environment, what does that mean? I'm thinking, in truth, you have between 6 and 7 seconds. And then finally, I think another piece to really consider here is what I like to call the newspaper rule. With a resume, Virginia Franco, one of the nation's leading resume writers in the country, breaks it down like this. We read resumes the same way that we read the components of that we read the news in a rush. And what we want to do here is we think about the two components of a news article that you look at when you quickly want to know what's going on in the world. The first is going to be the headline, and the second is that top paragraph. And those two sections are really going to tell you what the story is going to be about. So positioning is very, very important, and it's critical to think about that as we move forward. Now, I'm a big stats fan, and I was able to come up with 10 immediate facts that I can share with you guys today to help you really think about how to make an impact. And it's I want to dig into this, bust a few myths along the way. Most of the stats were updated in 2020. The data was pulled from Zeti, which is a digital resume platform site that aggregates statistical data from sources like Ladders, Career Builder, JobBite. And they also have their own database bank of 133,000 resumes. So they certainly have done a lot of research. But these are facts that I think are really going to be helpful. So first off, the first piece is that maybe you've heard that it's always good to have a one-page resume. Well, 77% of employers say that seasoned workers should not actually use a one-page resume. Recruiters are 2.9 times more likely to pick a candidate with a two-page resume. And for managerial roles or for entry-level positions, 1.4 more times. So that's something that maybe is a little bit different than what we've heard before. Try to keep it to one page, right? We've heard that a lot, but not so much the case. 2 pages seems to be a little bit more of a better piece of accuracy based on the research that's out there. Also, on average, it's no surprise we call this in recruiting the funnel for job applicants to get from the applicant to the interview stage, but only 10% of job applications actually ever result in interview invitations, and out of those who land those, 20% actually ever get the job. So if you think about that, that's about 2% of people that start in the process. Also, the job application success rate is between 2 and 3.4%. So, truthfully, guys, that means you're sending probably 30 to 50 resumes to get hired unless you have a strong network connection. And so very important there. 5 main sections that stood out as the most widely accepted in a resume. We'll cover all of these, but you'll see at the top were personal information, work experience, education skills, and the top 5 soft skills really consisted of communication, leadership, time management, problem solving. So we're seeing a trend here. I don't expect you guys to write this stuff down, by the way. We're going to have the slides available when we have the recording. So just want you to follow along for now. But the top 8 of 10 hard skills commonly listed are software specific. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So we're looking at Microsoft Office or other tools specific to your industry in the software space. Also, you could be facing an 88% job rejection rate if you include a photo. How crazy is that? So recruiters actually will spend half of those 6 to 7 seconds just looking at your photo. So it really does yourself a disservice to include that and almost distracts. So it's very much frowned upon. And then 70% of resumes are ignored if your email is unprofessional. So if you have that unprofessional email, it's time to get it right and make a change specifically for professional life because people really do look at that. So those are just some fun facts I wanted to lead off with. Ray's going to talk a little bit about before we get into the resume basics, just the power of networking and in real life and what a handshake means when we can do it again. Anyway, Ray, I'm going to kick it over to you. You're muted, sir.
Before we get into the resume, it's very important. When one is out of work, sometimes the natural reaction is to want to hide. And if you want to find a job, you don't want to hide. You've got to get out and talk to people. And so networking is really important. And there are two types of networking: random networking, which is what we do all the time. We meet at church, we meet with our groups of friends, and that's a really amazingly good way to get the word out that you're looking for a job. And the other type is targeted networking, which is something I teach when I'm coaching people. And we won't get into that in these sessions, but think about random networking. What do you do now that you've lost your job? When you walk up and you see a friend or you see someone you've never met and you're introducing yourself. That's what this is all about right here. And first thing is, when you let's say it's someone you don't know, you want to introduce your first and last name slowly. You don't walk up and say, "Hi, this is Ray Davis." You say, "It's Ray Davis." Of course, if you're me. I am conducting a job search and I'm looking for an opportunity in some function, whatever it is, or in some industry. And I'm really good at, and you name one or two or three of the skills you're good at. It's great to meet you. And all that time you're shaking hands with a firm handshake. Really important. At the end of that introduction, please tell me about yourself, because what you're trying to do is create rapport. You've now given them a little bit of information about yourself. Now ask them to give information about themselves. If they go on and talk about themselves incessantly, that's wonderful, because the way you create rapport is by having the other person talk and you listen. And that can start a conversation, which can lead to things that you would never have found had you not made the introduction. Because it's not just who you know, it's who you know that knows things. And so the only way you find out is to get out and talk to people. So let's move to the next slide now. So you have your personal handshake and your introduction down pat. Let's talk about resume basics. 1 or 2 pages. If you're newly out of school, it's a 1-page resume. If you've got some experience, it may go into 2, but you don't want to go beyond 2 pages. The critical sections John's talked about, obviously the contact information. And don't forget to have a LinkedIn account and put your LinkedIn link on into your contact information. At the top, after you've put your name and your contact information, you have a summary of qualifications, a summary paragraph, perhaps some bullet points, and there's a heading above that summary. And that heading ought to tell the person reading the resume the kind of job, the kind of work you do. For me, back when I was doing recruiting, I would get resumes and I would look at them and I could not figure out, because I didn't have a job readily, but they were very good resumes and good experience, but I could not determine where to file it. You've got to tell the recruiter where to file it, because your resume is a piece of inventory to a recruiter. And often they don't have an immediate job for you, but if you get into their filing system into the right place, perhaps later they will. So that heading over the summary is really important. And then obviously previous jobs and the dates you did them. Leave the months off. We don't need to know all that detail. Just tell us the years. Then under each job, accomplishments, achievements, and then finally education and job-related training. Really important here. You may have a basic resume, but if you are applying for a specific job, tailor your resume to that job. Use the words that you read in the ad that correspond with what you're trying to get across so that you're using the right words that communicate. And you'll find that that will lead to more interviews. Next slide. Thought I would walk you through a couple of basic chronological resumes. There are different kinds of resumes. Chronological, which is the normal that most people use, and but there are others for other purposes, especially if you're trying to change careers. But let's concentrate just on the chronological. Here's a very basic resume. Name, identification of the person. There's a paragraph at the top so that I know immediately that you're an administrative person and some of the skills they have. And then I can read some of their accomplishments. And some of these, if you were to be very specific about them, are not really accomplishments, but they are headed as accomplishments. And so even though they may be responsibilities or but don't have specific accomplishments there, it's still good to call them that. And then finally, the work experience showing the years. And you'll notice that there is a corporation name and then a job title. Below that are, again, accomplishments. And in this case, since this was an administrative job and it's hard to have accomplishments that are very specific, this person indicated the kinds of work that they do as a material handler. Next slide, please. And page 2, continuation of that. And you might notice that the most current experience, there's more space on the resume devoted to that. And then the earlier experience, the farther you get into the past, the less space you want in your resume devoted to that. And then finally, you see their education and professional training. So that's how kind of a basic chronological resume might look. Let's go to the next slide and see a more sophisticated resume. The same rules apply. Obviously, you don't have to put at the top chronological resume, but in this one, when you see Don John's resume, you immediately find out that he's a marketing executive. And then he tells us a bit about himself and where he's worked and the kinds of businesses in which he's worked. And he also mentions a Harvard MBA. That seems to grab people's eyes. And then he talks about the 6 things that he is really specialized in. Then he has professional experience. He's worked for Ashland from 97 to 2013. And then within that, the Valvoline Company from 2004 to 2013. He was VP of Marketing. And so if you scan down, you'll see that he was VP of Marketing there, VP of Marketing at Ashland Distributing, and so on. But let's stay on this page and look at the accomplishments. And underneath or next to the VP of Marketing, he explains his overall responsibility. Beneath that, you see 4 accomplishments. And look at what your eyes go to. He increased the brand's return on investment from a -8% to a +13%, and increased the income before tax by 2.7 million. So my point here is, if you can write your accomplishments and have numbers in them, percentages or numbers or millions of dollars, thousands of dollars, whatever it is, it grabs the eye. And another thing to note about accomplishments, the first one should be the most impactful, the one that is most important. And then the following accomplishments should be diminishing in importance or impact. So as you're thinking about listing your accomplishments, think in terms of which ones are the most important and make sure they're at the top, because we read from left to right, from top to down. And so that's a little lesson on what a good resume looks like. Let's go to page 2. And you'll notice that as we get farther in the past for Don Johns, for example, we get to his group marketing manager and the Procter & Gamble company, and then the Galerie Au Chocolat in Cincinnati. Those are just listed. There's no detail under them because they're too far in the past. My rule of thumb is the last 10 years of your experience are the ones you should emphasize, and they should take up the most space on your resume. There are lots of questions about whether you should, let's say you've been in, you've worked for 25 years and you don't want to show that you're an older person. Well, you can leave off 10 of the first 10 years. You don't have to show that. Nobody has a rule that says everything you've ever done has to be on a resume. So if you don't want to come across as a 65-year-old person, then leave them off. But understand that if you get into the interview, the interviewer may be shocked when they see someone with gray hair walk in, but now you're in the interview, so you've got a shot. And then finally, the last piece on a resume should be the education. And again, listed in reverse order, most recent to the past, as he has shown here, the MBA at Harvard, and then the BA at Thomas More. Okay, let's move to the next. And
all right,
that's John, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, I was going to back up on, because I had a couple of points there. So like what Ray is saying, as a recruiter, and Christie, feel free to chime in on this, but I think the headline is really important, like we talked about, and it's a great place to get a keyword in there. And I think the keyword on this resume that really stood out is that they're saying they are a senior marketing executive. So if you're a CFO or a COO or a head person in charge, you want to just list that. That's your career goal. You're getting a keyword in there. You're pointing that out. Also, the skills section is just so crucial, those hard skills. And I think, finally, and we'll get into this in the next session, but you'll see that applicant tracking systems kind of tell on themselves. So they like to list that requirement section at the bottom of the job description. And that's a great place to start aligning your skills so that those ATSs will actually start to track the same keywords. You see where we're going with that? So it's a great place to be able to swap in and out some of those hard skills that that they're looking for. Do you guys have any other thoughts around that before we move on?
Good point, John.
Okay, perfect. All right, so it's all about really knowing your audience here. So with that, boilerplate resumes, they're less successful than customized resumes. So truthfully, you can have a generic resume. It's always great on your end to start as that template. But, I think with that Zeti site that I mentioned earlier, when they looked and they saw that somebody had customized their resume 37 times for different jobs. So don't feel, I know it's a lot of work, guys, but honestly, you want to customize it to the employer, the audience that you're going for, because it's just gonna resonate so much better, especially if you're looking at those keywords that are important. Also, being too specific can confuse the audience. Your resume is a marketing tool. You got to think of it that way. You got to leave a little bit to mystery, right? You don't want to show the whole leg, so to speak. You want to give them a little bit to think about it and want to reach out and talk to you and learn more. So think about how it's actually a marketing tool for you. Also, remove it before you lose it. I like to say this, really the thing about your resume is all of it's good stuff, right? But the real deal is you don't want to let the good stuff bury the great stuff. The great stuff's the stuff that you want highlighted. It's that first bullet under each job title that really shows what you did. Or it's in your summary, you're really showing a powerful summary. You don't want to just throw in every great thing or good thing that you ever did. You want the great stuff to really resonate. So think about that. It's very important. And then also, if you're prepared to list it, you got to be prepared to back it up. So a lot of times, you know, being truthful and just being honest, if you haven't done the work yet, I would never recommend saying that you've done it or you're qualified to do it. I think then you're talking about what you're capable of, and that's a different conversation. And then also grammar. A lot of recruiters that I've worked with over the years, you know, and even hiring managers, they're quick to kick out a resume that, you know, truthfully has a grammatical error at all on it. So really watch that. Be careful with that. So as far as, you know, sort of our next kind of accomplishment here, I want to talk about a little bit about what a recruiter looks at. So Christie, Andrea, feel free to chime in here, but you know, truthfully, recruiters spend more time reviewing top performing resumes that have these factors in common. They're presented with simple layouts, with clearly marked sections and title headers, all written in clear font, and they use layouts that took advantage of the F pattern. And so what is the F pattern? Well, Ray kind of spoke to it, but I'm just going to break it down to you like this. The F pattern, you know, actually is a way that our eyes move when we read. So it's generally that left to right. In a matter of seconds, we kind of read at a really quick speed. So it's top of the page for really important headlines first, then we go down the left side of the page, and then lastly across the page again to read bold text. So how to maximize the F pattern, I think you guys should definitely do some research in that. That's going to be a piece of homework I have for you. But they have heat maps now of how people read resumes. It's pretty cool. But it includes normally in the F pattern to maximize how your resume is being read, you want to include the most important points in the first two paragraphs on the page. Use headings and subheadings. Start headings and subheadings with words carrying the most information. If users see the first two words, they should still get the gist of the section. And you want to visually group small amounts of related content to make it easier on them and surround it with a border. Maybe even to have a different bit of a background. Bold important words and phrases, and then from there, you know, that's just the start of it. But like I said, I would recommend kind of researching that, and then recruiters really spend less time reviewing resumes that have these factors in common. So cluttered layouts characterized by really long sentences, columns that leave no white space on the page whatsoever, just overwhelming. You know, sensory overload, text flow that didn't draw the eye down the page, and a reliance on keyword stuffing. So I think those are the kind of tips that I have. Christie, Andrea, anything else that you want to add in there?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. Well, from this point of view, I want to pass the baton, so to speak, to Christie on our team. She's got a little bit of insight into cover letters. Christie? Oh, sorry. You'll want to unmute yourself too.
Yep, I got it. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
So this is something that I've really, especially right now, hiring for a site that's hiring for probably, we started out at about 30 roles and we're down to the last 12. But cover letters have helped a lot, even in an hourly manufacturing setting, because it's telling a story. So I know that, you know, it's a personal preference. Sometimes businesses are going to require that you upload a cover letter, but I think that it's really important no matter what job you're going for, because it's telling kind of who you are and what you're looking for. Your resume is giving you the facts of your story, what, you know, where you've worked, maybe your accomplishments, your education, but I think that storytelling is huge. And it builds that relationship with an employer. When I read a cover letter that's very lined out, not long, just good description in it. It tells me a little story about who this person is. It makes me feel like I do have some type of relationship. When I do pick up the phone and talk to them or bring them on site, then I feel like I have a little bit more of a background to relate to the hiring manager or the HR manager to interview. So I have a little more of a backfill. And then I think, too, it really does show that you're serious about, you know, that position, with that company. So it's something that says this isn't just me throwing 20 resumes out there. I've specifically built this resume for you. It might even give achievements that you have, you know, accomplished in previous employers' settings that might be applicable to the next company. So I think that's important too. You can go to the next slide. And so when we kind of look at, you know, why it is so important to look at a cover letter, the one that really stuck out to me and something that I continue to see is, especially as COVID and people have either, companies have, you know, downsized or closed, now people are looking for a change of career. Point blank, I just had a resume came through. They did not have any kind of manufacturing background, and I probably wouldn't have gone too far with it other than it did have a cover letter attached. And the candidate explained, one, about his farming background, that he graduated from the University of Kentucky with agricultural, a science degree, and he was actually ended up being a really good fit for a processing technician role, where they're in the lab and they're actually working, you know, with products that we have to make sure that they are, the quality is good for production. So again, I would have missed a really great candidate. And not only that, you know, as we got deeper into his cover letter and even our discussion, finding out some of his leadership roles. You know, it's great when we list them on our resume, but sometimes we can talk a little more in-depthly, especially about, you know, what we do as a leader, you know, and again, make that applicable to the current, you know, position that we're applying for. I saw a cover letter the other day, and I don't know how long ago the resume was written, but it definitely wasn't written that was outlining their current roles. So it was just like, I couldn't even take it seriously because it was so outdated, and even like where it had date, it just said date, not even the current date. It didn't even have who it was going to or what company it was for. So, you know, those are just little things that it's those little touches that can make a difference. So, but, you know, again, you're explaining your motivation, any kind of changing of careers, and a huge one also for me is employment gap. You know, sometimes we can really read into, oh, okay, well, they left this company in August of 2014 and then started the next company September 2014. So they may have had a transition, or, you know, you can still ask, you know, inquire about those gaps. But again, you can say, well, I worked for X company and they downsized, or they moved the company to their corporate office in another state, and I wasn't really, you know, wanting to relocate. So I think it's just that explanation gives us a little chance to you know, explain our story a little more in depth than just the resume.
All right, great. And I love that. And I think just to add a little bit of color, you know, I read a study where, you know, it's very industry specific for cover letters, but when some industries, you know, you may only see a 17% rate of open on cover letters, but all of those recruiters surveyed said that out of the 17% that they opened, 100% of them were impactful. And we often get the question in recruiting, should I put reason for leaving on my resume? Absolutely not. So what Christie's saying here is you can tell a little bit more of your story in the cover letter. Now I would caution, don't overshare, but also it's a good opportunity, especially now we're in a pandemic. Now more than ever, it's strange for employers and it's strange for candidates. It's a weird relationship. And the one thing that might be tough is, how do I do a lot of things right now if I'm unemployed? But you can find ways to be productive. It could be LinkedIn Learning. It could be taking a class online or a webinar. It could be working at Total Wine if you need to in the meantime, and that's okay. And it just shows an employer that you're productive and that you're, you know, trying to bide your time the best you can. And so it's okay to list that kind of stuff on your cover letter. It shows the initiative, right? So thanks so much, Christie. That was wonderful. Okay, so the hiring manager, I get this question a lot as a recruiter, and I think it's really important to just kind of share some insights into what hiring managers are really looking at and what they're looking for. And those are two different things. So when they first look at your resume, the hiring manager, the top 5 things that they look at here, according to Zip Jobs, are name, current and previous employer, start and end date, education and degree, and achievements from your work experience. Very, very cut and dry, very linear. And I would agree with that. I think that, you know, managers aren't going to probably be as meticulous necessarily as we are. They want to extrapolate the data that they're looking for quickly. But, you know, the thing that is probably most important here is we know what they look at, but, you know, what do they look for? And the number one reason I would say is they're looking for a reason to continue reading your resume to start with. So some job seekers try to focus on creative language, clever content to spark interest, but truthfully that can be distracting. So you want to make sure that you pull them in, that you're saying the right things, that you're aligned to the job description on your resume, because it's really going to help kind of get them to dive in more. And that's the goal. That's the first goal, and it should be. So, and then from there, the second is potential for value for the company. All the fluff aside, showing this is key. So some of your, so if your summary captures the interest, you're halfway there, that's good. But you still need the rest of the resume to convince them that you're the right candidate for the job. So those bullets underneath, those titles and the work that you've done, again, Bray mentioned it, the very first bullet needs to be the most impactful one for each job. So you can continue to draw them in and further solidify that you're a qualified candidate. And then thirdly, it's a simple one, but can you do the work? Your resume really needs to align to that job that they're seeking, and the story you tell once you get past the summary will help them believe that you can do this type of work. And some of that's going to come down to capability. You're going to need to be very clear and very specific around that. And then finally, you know, are you going to stick around? I can tell you that I get hiring managers asking me all the time, you know, hey, this person had a gap here or there, and, you know, what's the deal? Are they going to come in and leave? Or even if folks are looking to change location, say, you know, I did a lot of hiring all across the country, and oftentimes on those coastal regions, if I had somebody moving from a Midwest state to Florida on the beach, they would say, are they just looking for a reason to get to the beach? And then I'm not important after that. So I'll say that really showing that you are a committed candidate. In Christie's point, the language on the cover letter will help with that, but they're just going to look for, you know, what your ultimate end goal is. Are they just a means to an end, or are you going to stick around? And job hopping is a little tough. You may have some really good reasons for why that happened, and it might be part of that story that you're going to have to talk through. Ray and I would definitely encourage you to practice that story, but also the narrative can start with your cover letter, but just make sure you're ready to address that, because they're looking at it for sure. Ray, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you from here to just talk a little bit about reason for leaving.
Okay, yeah, now we've sort of talked about the basics of resumes and given some insight into how recruiters look at them. Now let's kind of transition from that to some other aspects of job search that you're going to encounter. And one is that, without a doubt, in almost every interview, whether it's over the phone or in person or by Skype or whatever, you're going to get the question, well, why did you leave the company? Why are you unemployed? Why are you no longer working at this company? And so you must be prepared for this. And if you were fired for cause, you're going to have work very hard on a positive statement, because what you want to be able to say in a very few sentences is something positive that's about you and the company. You don't want to denigrate your previous employer, and it's got to be truthful, because if you get further into the process and references are checked and they find out you've lied or you've not told the truth, you're in trouble. You're not going to get the job. So when I work with people, sometimes they have pretty difficult circumstances to explain, but I can usually help them find a way to explain in a very few words, in a positive way, what happened. And then you need to practice it until it's as easy to say as your own name. When you're under the pressure of an interview, practice is really important, because if you aren't practiced at it, you will have a difficult answer. And I emphasize 2 or 3 sentences because it's the old, when you were a kid and you just got into the cookie jar and you got caught and you started to tell the shaggy dog story about why you really aren't having a cookie out of the cookie jar. The longer you talk, the more you leave yourself open to further questions about that. And you don't need the interview to focus on what happened at the last employer. Next. Now, it's really important for people to understand the job market. And I think this is the place where most people fall off the rail and go down the wrong path in seeking a job. They don't realize that the job market is made up of 2 parts: the jobs we know about and the ones we don't, the hidden jobs. And we've done lots of research, and there are about 25 to 30% of the jobs that are available that we know about. We know about them through recruiters and websites. And so everybody knows about these jobs. The thing that most people don't think about are the hidden jobs. And these are only known by the people in the organizations, the managers and the executives. So let's go to the next slide and look at some of those. Okay, this is a nice visual of the 30 and 70%. Next slide, please. The visible jobs. Here's some characteristics that are important. If you are seeking a job that's in the visible market, the job description and the compensation are already fixed, and you have lots of people you're competing with. Most people looking for a job are focused on the visible jobs. Contrast that to the hidden jobs, where the job description and the compensation are far more flexible. That's because the jobs haven't really been evaluated by human resources. They're still in the minds of the executives and the managers that have the ability to hire for them. And there are so many fewer people seeking these jobs, because the only way you can find out about them is through networking. And that means you have to, let's go to the next slide, please. In networking, you have to get out from behind your desk and your computer and go talk to people. And most people aren't prepared to do that. They are afraid to do that. They're afraid to pick up the phone and call someone at a high level, a higher level than they are, someone who could be a decision maker. And so they rely on the visible jobs, and they focus there. So, but think about this as you're thinking about your own job search. Do you want to compete for 90% of the job with 90% of the job seekers who are pursuing 30% of the jobs? Or do you want to compete with 10% of the job seekers that are pursuing 100% of the jobs. Christie, which would you choose? I caught Christie sleeping. So let's see, John, let's let Christie off the hook. John, we'll have John answer, and then we'll ask Christie which they would prefer. John, what do you say? You got to unmute, John.
There we go. Yeah. No. So I would absolutely pursue the hidden jobs, and I think part of that though is you know, that we're going to talk further as we go into this rabbit hole in our series, guys, is around networking, because you know, part of that hidden job uncovering comes from networking, and it comes from knowing somebody that's in the industry, and it could be a friend, it could be a referral, but you're going to be the first one in front of them before that job's even open, and that's already giving you a leg up in the process. And I think that's just so powerful to make that connection. What about you, Christie? I'm going to unmute you.
Yeah,
Here you go.
I would definitely look for the hidden, obviously, I think is a given. I think sometimes those are obviously a little more challenging to locate, but definitely more beneficial.
Well, obviously, when you see down below the recommendation, you know, you need to maximize your return on investment. And what I mean by that, the only investment you can make in job search is your time. And your time is a scarce commodity. And so you want to get the most out of it. If you spend 30% of your time pursuing the visible jobs, and you spend about 70% of your time pursuing the hidden jobs, you'll be allocating a scarce resource in the best possible way. Christie, it's up to you now.
Yes, so, you know, you get your cover letter and your resume, and you've got your phone screen or interview scheduled. So, you know, you really need to make sure you have yourself prepared. So, you know, do your homework. I think my favorite saying is winging it might work for a wedding toast, but it certainly won't work for a job interview. So you definitely want to make sure you know what you're walking into. You know, even read if the company has anything going on in the news, any projections, you know, you're understanding what's going on with that company so that you're able to come in and even dazzle them a little bit more and be a little more articulate with what's going on in their world today. Show off your personality. You're more than just that cover letter and resume. I can tell you that I've had great resumes and I've gotten excited about candidates, and I get on the phone with them and it just falls flat. And, you know, we're hiring not only for a role, but for a culture. So, and as many companies are, so you want to make sure that you're shining in that moment. You know, always project that can-do attitude. You know, maybe you don't have experience in something that they're looking for, but you can always spin that in saying, hey, well, I do have somewhat relevant experience, and maybe kind of go into that so that you can show them exactly what you're capable of. And thinking on the fly about a question and giving them a good answer, that's going to show them that you're quick on your feet and that you really are serious again about that position. And have those real conversations. Just make sure that they know, again, that this is important to you, that the job is important to you, and that you really are serious about the company and the role itself and what you can bring to it. And my favorite one is always ask questions beyond your salary and benefits. Yes, those are very important to all of us when we're looking for a role, but they want to know that you're looking for more than just a job, that you're looking for a career, and how that's going to mesh between the two, the company and yourself. So, and then again, going back to showing what you can offer that company, you know, listing your accomplishments, that's the eye catcher. Now here's your chance to really go more in depth and say, okay, I worked on this project. This was the percentages of what the outcome was. You know, really show your deliverables. And then just focus on accomplishments rather than your skills. Again, your resume has already, lured them in with your skills and listing out your accomplishments. Now you really want to show, what your edge is and just giving that information about where that journey took, how successful it was, not only for you and what you learned in doing a project, but possibly how that could translate to something that they may be looking forward in the future.
That's great. Well, and so we've covered a lot, guys. We're kind of winding down. We're getting ready to get into questions. But before we do, I want to kind of share our homework assignment for today. So we always love homework. We have a homework assignment for this one, and I think it starts with, again, evaluating your resume today. You may not have touched it for 10 years, 15 years. You may have been in a state of disarray, but now it's time to give it a facelift. Use that resume logic that we talked about earlier in the call. Find immediate opportunities to improve, follow the basics, use the formatting tips that Ray provided, and just be mindful to your audience. You're going to customize this thing a ton of times for each company and your cover letter as well. But again, that might start with just shortlisting those main primary target companies that you're really interested in. Just like, companies don't want to be spammed with resumes, you may not want to spam all the companies. You may want to start with a targeted list first, and hopefully that can help. Also, research your industry, job market. Right now it's a crazy time. Some industries are not really impacted at all, where others are just, we don't know what it's going to look like until 2021, unfortunately. So where automotive might be in a state of disarray, in those places in IT where they're mostly doing remote work, they're rocking and rolling and maybe doing more business. So be cognizant of that. And then if you are finding that your industry is one of those ones that's impacted, you may need to upskill or reskill and look at other options, alternatives, right, in the meantime. And then, as Ray kind of mentioned and Christie, choose your strategy, maximize your return on investment. So we encourage you to kind of do some brainstorming there, and then make yourself stand out, as Christie kind of mentioned. Show what you can offer the company, and make sure that when you finalize that resume that you feel pretty good, that it's a proud marketing tool to help you get to that interview process. All right, I'm going to pitch it over to Chip.
All right, thank you all so much. This has been super informative. Well, we want to open it up to questions, so we're going to unmute everybody, but quickly, there was a couple of questions on the chat feature that it's interesting you answered them as we went along. So there was one about where should I put certifications, and Ray had responded to that, so sort of right after your name and also list with your education, so in that area of the resume. Another one was an interesting question that says, how does a candidate target jobs that may not be at the same level that they previously worked at? And they give an example of formerly a director, but very interested in manager level or even a generalist level. How do they go about that without getting kicked out for being, quote, overqualified, I think is the question.
Yeah, sure. So I can take that one. So I would say that if you are not quite qualified for a role, then it's about showing your capability, right? You're hungry, you're ambitious, you are looking to take the next step in your career. So be transparent about that. I think that's part of your mission statement, your mantra. Show that you have the skills to do it. Ray, I don't want to speak for you, but I know you've said several times just to make sure that you are qualified to do the job, right? And that not only does that necessarily mean that you have to be experienced in the job, you just have to be ready to start the job, because every employer is going to say, we want you to hit the ground running. So you need to represent your skills and yourself in a way that you can show that pretty quickly.
I think, John, maybe I didn't articulate very well. I think the question was about, I'm looking for a job that's at a lower level than I've previously been at. How do I target those without seeming overqualified?
Yeah, I think it goes, it's similar logic, though. It goes in the sense of, I've accomplished all these great things in my career, but I'm just happier being an individual contributor. I'm at a place in my life, if we talked in the first session about where you're at, knowing who you are and where you want to go. You might be a place in your career that you want to slow down a little bit, and that doesn't mean that you're not willing to do work. So again, I think the translation is finding a way to set up your skills. Like, I've had a wonderful career, right? But in my skill toolbox, I've got all these things I can do, but this is what I want to do, and this is why I want to do it, and just and you know, sharing that story. Ray, do you have any other color? I know you do this every day.
Well, this I think you've answered the question pretty well, but it has stimulated another thought that I wanted to share with everybody. One of the things that I saw as a recruiter, and John, I bet you see it every day, is that my guess is that 80% of the resumes I received as a recruiter, I could take one look at and say, what were they thinking, and throw it away. Okay, does that resonate, John?
Yeah, Christie, would you say the same thing? I saw you shaking your head.
I've actually seen several resumes here lately of someone who's in a higher level position and applying, and I'm like, I want to do a phone screen and reiterate, okay, you know, this position, this is what the details of. I know that you were in a supervisor or managerial position before. You know, what has you interested in stepping back some? And usually, again, if, you know, in your cover letter, you can explain, I'm looking for a slower pace, or I travel, you know, 3 weeks out of the month, and I'm looking for more of a work-life balance. So I think, you know, those are things that it red flags sometimes the hiring manager, because they're like, oh, well, they're already at this level. I don't think we'll keep them very long if we bring them, you know, in at, you know, a lower level position. But sometimes people are really, and I think too, one guy just explained, I'm traveling to 5 to 6 different states with COVID, and we don't know how long this is going to go on. I really want to pull back from my traveling. So I think everybody's is individual, you know, as far as, you know, sometimes people are just looking for another job because I know their job's ending. But I've been finding more than not that people are just wanting to step back. And they may just be in a place where they are tired of not being able to have that work-life balance, and they're looking for something a little more geared to where they can shut it off and go home.
Yeah,
that's great.
Go ahead, John.
Well, I was going to say, I had some more questions come in, Chip, so I'm going to try to get through some of these too. So Ray, this one was for you. If you are applying for a different job position, should you include a title, and especially what about if it was a hidden job?
I'm still trying to understand.
On the resume, should you include, you know, sort of a title that you're targeting if you may not know what that is, especially if it's a hidden job?
Well, on the resume, you want to head your summary paragraph at the top with something that indicates the kind of work that you can do. So you don't want to be so specific. You know, we remember the resume we reviewed, the fellow from Harvard had marketing at the top, marketing executive, as I recall. Or it could be at a lower level, a marketing professional. Or if you're just out of college and you want to go into marketing, it could be just simply marketing. But you don't want to pigeonhole yourself by saying VP marketing. VP marketing could mean, in a small company, the top marketing job. But in a large company, you wouldn't even be qualified for it. So don't pigeonhole yourself with titles, but indicate the area in which you have expertise and wish to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, maybe you want to say you're VP of marketing, and that's a choice, but again, I think you know, you only know so much about the employer if you're going after a hidden job, and maybe some of that is homework and research, right? You know, what jobs do you see organizationally in the org chart of researching other people that work there? what do those titles look like? You know, and I get this often. You know, director at one company could be a vice president at another. So you got to be careful and just really try to do your homework before you tailor that. But that's a great question. Also, we got another question. Christie, maybe you'd want to answer this one. What are your thoughts on outside activities? Should they list only professional organizations or include nonprofits that they work with as well?
I say list them. I look at leadership as leadership, and that's something I don't always hire just for what that position is right there, but what they could go into. When I referenced the UK grad student that I probably wouldn't really have looked at without his cover letter explaining what his you know, background was and how that could translate to something here. You know, he had several things that listed in leadership, and as he went through the interview process, he was, you know, they were very much like, he's someone we would definitely target for, you know, us to track onto a leadership role at some point. So I think that gives you an edge. Now, obviously, you don't want, you know, 2 pages of all your organizations, but, you know, I definitely would list it. I think that would help.
And especially if you're entry in your career, I think, you know, even if it's volunteer work or internship work, it counts. So list it.
Yes.
And, you know, as long as it's purposeful, right? So I think I absolutely agree.
Yes.
Ray, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
No, good answer.
Okay, and then we had another question here. If you don't have a degree, could you include seminars attended as continuing education? I'm going to answer that and say yes. I mean, if you're going to say, you know, I'm pursuing continuing education and it's relevant to the career and especially relevant to the job that you're applying for, then absolutely. That shows initiative. I would say so. Would you guys agree with that?
Yes,
absolutely.
Okay, and then
go ahead.
I have another one here. How do you emphasize that you are eager to learn new tasks if you may not have the qualification listed in the job description?
Let me talk about something that has relevance to that question, and that is that as a recruiter, I did receive lots and lots of resumes. It just had nothing to. It was so easy to throw them away. It was just, I could not understand why they even applied. And the reason for that phenomenon is that when we're looking for a job and we need a job, we essentially see every job as something that we could do. But what we don't seem to understand is that the employer is looking for someone who can do that job right now, hit the ground running. And of course, you could do it if you had adequate training and so on, but you cannot do it. If you cannot do the job and hit the ground running, don't apply. Don't waste your time. I don't care about the recruiter's time, John, but don't waste your time on jobs because you are not going to get the job. Now, if you have done the job just below the one you're seeking, apply, because that indicates that you may be able to make the move up. If you've done the job equal to what's being advertised, fine, but don't fall prey. I've called it I think it's a mental illness. It hasn't made itself into the psychological annals yet, but it's the I could do this job syndrome. And employers are not looking for people who could do the job. So save yourself a lot of time and effort and heartache by sending out lots and lots of cover letters and resumes on jobs that you could do, and focus on the ones that you absolutely are ready to do today. And
I can give a couple of
more success, I think.
I can give a couple of specific examples where that resonates. I think one is, you know, I had a job that I'm recruiting for that, you know, look, a lot of employers will say education's nice to have, but sometimes it's required. And I have a job that requires a PhD. And so anybody that applied, and I had over 60% of candidates that applied, did not have a PhD. And for the job and what it called for, it was an academic related role. There's no way around that. And so when you're looking at requirements in a job description, look for those required and preferred points. Now, the one caveat I have with that is if you see a job ask for 5 to 7 years experience, but maybe you're at 3 years, right? But you've got everything else in there, then I would say narrate that story in your cover letter and show that you're hungry and you're pretty close, right? But get ahead of that and you know, call it out for what it is and address it, and then that'll kind of get you in the door in a place where they understand that you've you've digested it well, but you're making a case, right? That would be my add to that. Is that fair, Ray?
Yeah, that and my rule of thumb, John, is look at all the job requirements. If you meet 80% of them, go for it. If you don't, if you fall far short of that, pass and look for other opportunities.
All right, Chip, we have any other questions?
Yeah, let's go to the folks on the phone. I know we're a little over time. We want to respect everybody's time. So those of you that are out there on the call and on the phone, are there any questions? I don't know. Make sure you unmute yourselves, or if Andrea, can you unmute everybody?
I cannot.
You cannot. Okay. Can you do that, John?
I don't think we did it last time, but if you guys can type those questions in the chat box for everyone. Again, that's on the, if you go, it could be at the bottom or it could be at the top right. If you see those 3 dots, it'll say chat, and then you guys can type right there. We can go ahead and address them. And we're happy to stay on a little bit longer here. We know we went through a lot today, and we appreciate you guys. I had one question that came up. Should I include references on my resume? And so this is kind of a loaded question. I've seen different schools of thought on it. I see a lot of resumes that have references, but I would advise against that. And here's why. I think, first off, you're taking up some white space that's important by listing other people's names and contact information. And secondly, I think, you're going to be requested for those eventually, and it's more about showing the willingness to have references. So I think I would say to asterisk at the bottom of your second page to say references available upon request, right? And that gives you an opportunity to make sure that your references get a heads up that those people are going to call, especially if you are sending your resume off to multiple sources or you are planning on banking on those references for a variety of jobs. Your job search started 7 weeks ago, and and we're talking about today and how many jobs have you applied for since then. You want to give those references a heads up so that when people do reach out, that they're ready to respond. So I wouldn't list their contact information, because some of them you may find out are going on vacation and you need to add another one in. So you get in this whole process of you're almost kind of in trouble before you start. So I just think showing the willingness by saying references available on request makes it simple, makes it easy, and allows you to pivot if you need to.
John, I have one question come through.
Okay.
Is it ever acceptable to use a functional resume rather than a chronological resume?
I'll take that if you want, John.
Yeah, sure.
The most used resumes.
Ray, you muted yourself.
Yeah, Ray, I think you accidentally got muted.
The chronological is the most used, but there are times when a functional resume is necessary. One is when you're trying to change careers and you're trying to emphasize the skills and capabilities you have and de-emphasize where you did that work, because perhaps you want to do that, transfer those skills to a whole new industry. So there are real good uses for the functional resume. Another use for it is to sort of hide if you've had a gap in your employment and you're looking for a way to, again, sort of de-emphasize that. It's possible in a functional resume to do that. Um, but I know that recruiters prefer the chronological, and my advice to anybody who's thinking of changing careers is that's a very difficult thing to do. I personally have done it. I've coached a lot of people through it, and it is it takes a lot of work. And if that's what you want to do, you might be well to have someone help you do it. Some professional who's been there and done it and knows the ropes. I hope that helps.
All right. Well, I think we could try this again. Any further questions out there? We're gonna, if we can get folks unmuted. Maybe we can, maybe not.
Yeah, I think Zoom doesn't give the option to unmute all. So if anyone wants to unmute themselves, I think they have that capability at this point.
John,
Yep.
Debbie asked me privately, what is the best way to tap into that hidden market without going out of the house?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to take a stab at that, and then you can add in.
Take a look at that.
So if you are, you know, tapping into a hidden job market, you know, the first thing is, you know, again, I think start with that list of targeted companies. You know, where would you want to work? Where have you heard good things? You know, narrow that list down. In your region that you live in, you can know probably or find out pretty quickly where those top companies that you just, you know, would have a strong burning desire to reach out to first. And then I think from there, I would start with LinkedIn. You know, it is the king of professional networking, undisputed. And I think from that point of view, find out who works there in those roles. But again, be prepared to speak to why you're reaching out. I think the thing is you don't want to be ambiguous when you reach out to a computer or a recruiter, and so when you reach out, you know, say, hey, I'm very interested to learn more about your marketing area. I think I could add value, and I have a, you know, I have a background that I think would speak to what you guys might be looking for, and would love to learn more if you had a chance. So, you know, cultivating that conversation, but being pointed about it will be important. But I would say start with your short list of companies that are in your field and do it via LinkedIn. That would be my recommendation.
Same here. I agree.
All right. Well, again, we want to thank everybody for attending. If you don't have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us individually. You can find our information on the Hannah Resource Group website, as well as information about the upcoming sessions that we have remaining. There are 3 more every Wednesday at 11 for the next 3 weeks. Again, I want to thank Christie for being a great guest speaker today, and to Andrea, Ray, and John for all hosting this. Just a really great benefit for folks, especially now in the times that we're in. So we want to thank you all very much. One last question I see. It says, can you give an example of state a positive reason for leaving a job after you actually left an employer on poor terms? Anybody want to take that one?
I'll take it, John, by saying, off the top of my head, I cannot. But if Maria, if someone would like to send me an email to me, giving me the circumstances, I will help her.
Okay. You want to quickly give her your resume or your email address?
Yeah, I think. So so his email and all of our emails, guys, you'll see most of our first names other than mine. Mine just says Hannah Resource, but mine's JOHN. But it's Ray, Andrea, or John at hannahresource.com. If you send anything to us and you want to ask Christie a question, we can get it to her. She's got a different email, but that said, I can add a little bit more to that one as well. If it's a toxic situation that you left on poor terms, I love how you said focus on the positive, right? And so, you know, most of that you want to have your practice story that Ray talks about in the conversation when you get to the interview. But I think when you if you want to list it in a cover letter, you know, maybe it's personal growth or development, or to find a company that aligns with the next step in your career. It's not lying. It's being forthright in the fact that there's something in that environment, whatever it was, that didn't work out for you. But to me, I see that's not a good cultural fit. So that's where I would start is turning that it wasn't a good cultural fit and turning that negative into I wanted to find the right cultural fit, or I wanted to find an area to grow. Focus on what that means to you in your career. That's some additional emphasis I can give there. And thanks, Andrea, for doing that. And great question. And then we had another question come in. Will the recording be available for attendees? Absolutely. Give us about 24 hours, guys. We've got to process the video, but it will be up on our website. And, as you want to refer back, we will also have our PDF slide deck available on there from today as well. So anything else, guys? Any other questions? Okay. Well, Chip, thanks for being such a great host today.
Sure.
I think we can go ahead and call it for this one. We do appreciate you all. Again, this is a free service for the community, and we want to spread the word. So feel free to share within your network, guys. We appreciate you riding along. Hopefully this has added value. It helped in some way at least today, and then absolutely feel free to reach out to us if you do have questions. But otherwise, we thank you again, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 11.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.